Hi, ladies and gentlemen, karibu sana. This is Morning Cafe. It is the 10th day of December 2024. That means it is the 16th day of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And right here at Cape Media, we've made sure that for the 16 days, we continuously tell you about this whole move of gender-based violence and what you need to do. On this last day, we focus on the role of men and boys in ending gender-based violence against girls and young women and just women. And that is going to be discussing today. And we're privileged to be having a research scientist from African Population and Health Research Center. His name is Anthony Ido Ajayi. He tells me he's from Nigeria, but then he's been in Kenya for about 6 years. That means he's technically Kenyan at this point. Karibu sana, Anthony.
Santeni sana.
No, for the whole crew. First off, now tell us, as much as I have told the people that you're a research scientist, what else does Anthony do out here? And you could also tell us what the center does.
My name is Anthony Ajayi, as you rightly introduced me. I'm a researcher at the African Population and Health Research Center, where I co-lead our work on adolescent sexual and reproductive health. But I've also had the privilege to, study the role of men in improving SRHR outcome, GGB, gender-based violence being one of those SRHR outcomes. And I've, over the past 3-4 years, done a lot of mapping research to see what research is available on the continent of Africa on the role of men in ending violence against women and girls. And we've also had the privilege to do research on, how do Africans conceptualize positive masculinity? Mm-hmm. Because mostly programs that engage men to end violence against men and girls or to improve SRH outcomes are called positive masculinity programs. So what does that term mean to Africans? So that's a study we did in South Sudan and as well as in Malawi. But also to understand what are the challenges in engaging men to end violence against men and girls. What are the enablers for engaging men? What are the facilitators? What do men want in programs that target them? Also to sort of understand approaches that are being used in different countries to reach out to men and boys to end violence against men and girls. But also, I've also been part of the efforts to develop an African Union Convention on ending violence against men and girls, which, when it comes to pass, it to be a huge instrument to demand accountability and also to support the efforts to end violence against women and girls. Wow. As for our center, we're a premier research institution. It's truly African-owned and African-led research institution, a think tank that focuses on population and health issues in Africa. We are not only interested in identifying the problems, but also to be part of the solution to the African developmental issues. So we do research, we also do capacity building because we believe it's important that we have more Africans do research on these issues. Currently, Africa only contributes about 1% of global research. So we felt that that's a huge gap. We need more Africans. Given that we are 10% of the world's population, we should do more in terms of our contribution to research. So as a result of that, we are training researchers across Africa just so that they can be there, be able to contribute more. But also we do policy engagement because that's how we can transform life in Africa through research. So we engage policy actors as well. Okay,
so even as you continue, you're going to be breaking it down and helping us understand. You've mentioned the research, and we'll be getting into what is this research saying in Kenya, in different parts of the country, as well as Africa as a continent. Mm-hmm. But first off, as I had mentioned, today being the 16th day of these 16 days that we've been having, first of all, as a center, what have you been seeing in Kenya as well as Africa? The theme that was set for this whole 16 days, the kind of activities that have been there, have they actually materialized? Are we seeing impact in this whole 16 days?
No, I mean, the symbolism of these 16 days of activism is first a recognition that the rate of violence against women on the continent is unacceptable. So it's part of an advocacy to say we are saying no to violence against women and girls. We are saying no to GBV. Yes, there is impact in terms of more awareness. It's important that more people are aware that violence should not be tolerated for any reasons. And maybe just to go back a little bit, globally, issues of violence against men and girls is a problem. It's not a problem limited to Kenya or to Africa. It's a problem that is global.
Yes.
Because 1 in 3 women had experienced physical and or sexual violence. And these have a lot of implications for their health and well-being, for their mental health, for their sexual and reproductive health. In fact, part of the drivers of HIV and unintended pregnancies, also sexual violence. So, because many women are raped and girls are raped, even contributing to teenage pregnancy, because there's also a lot of attention on teenage pregnancy. So, a substantial number of girls are getting pregnant because they are being violated as well. So, and this is important to mention. But it's also a developmental issue. In fact, there was an estimate that shows that gender-based violence contributes a loss of $8 trillion to global economy. That's huge amount of money that could be used for other things. But more importantly, if we also look at that money, it's also a cost for not being able to be productive because you're hospitalized. It's the cost of hospitalization, if you count it globally. So it's a major issue. But here in Kenya, 2 in 5 women reported to also have experienced gender-based violence. That's also huge. And that's why it's important, and that's the 16 days of activism is important. Of course, what have made the news as well is the issue of femicide, women dying in the hands of their partner. It's also a major issue, not only in Kenya, but also as the beginning of the year, you see there was a protest. Kenya also made the news recently. The athletes that sadly lost her life.
I mean, for Kenya it has been big because starting the year around February, March, there was a huge protest. Today we do expect a number of women rights groups, human rights groups, to be protesting across different parts of the country. You say Kenya is not isolated in this, but from Kenya, we haven't heard of other countries of recent femicide cases. Why is that probably?
No, it's also the case not only in Kenya, as I said. In South Africa, there was a total shutdown. I think in 2021 or 2022, and it was a massive protest that even forced the president to constitute a committee to look into the issue. So, but I think it's important that these issues are not swept under the carpet. Because as you know, issues of domestic issues, it's between husband and wife, family should settle it. But then when it comes to femicide, it becomes a criminal matter. It's no longer an issue that you can address within the family. So, and that's why it's important that everyone have a very good understanding of the magnitude of this problem, and to begin to see their role in being part of the solution in addressing the problem.
All right. Well, Antonio, when you take a look at the typical African man, either Kenya or Nigeria, the African man is considered to have similar roles, being the provider and protector. Even from your research, walk us through how, and let's start this conversation with this basic family setup before we go to the whole clan system and even nationally, really. As a father or someone in the family setup, what are the roles of this man in this home setup and how he contributes either directly or indirectly to gender-based violence?
Now, that's an important question. And we've asked these questions to a number of participants in our study in South Sudan and in Malawi, just sort of to understand the ideal man, who is an ideal man. And the overwhelming response is that an ideal man is a benevolent patriarch that provides and protects for the family. That's the primary role of a man from an African perspective. We found the same in Malawi as we found in South Sudan. I believe if we replicate the research all across Africa, even we interviewed older women, younger women, young boys, you know, all across.
All of them are saying provide and protector.
Provide and protector. And it's a duty of a man to protect as well. And that's in conflict with, you know, being violent towards your family member. You're supposed to protect them. So there's a bit of a paradox when a man that's supposed to protect is actually now being violent towards the children or towards. So that conflict itself is problematic in that sense.
And that same question, because I'm interviewing young boys, young girls, and them telling you a man is a protector and a provider. So what were they thinking about a typical woman?
So for a typical woman,
typical African woman, that is.
Typical African woman is supposed to be nurturing, right? Okay. To nurture the family, to provide also for the family in a way, maybe it's to provide food for the family, to nurture the kid, to instill moral values in the children. So if the kids are doing well, thanks to the role of the woman, because the woman has really instilled values into their kids. The man is probably out there trying to provide, making money, doesn't have time to actually instill values. But a woman, typically, is supposed to play a feminine role to also, you know, care for the family and for everyone in the home.
So will that mean that this typical African man is out of touch with the African setup, the home, you know, setup of how things run in this family? And he comes to this house and his excuse one is, I am tired, I have been providing and protecting, why are you not respecting me? And then thus the gender-based violence would occur. Is that what the research that, you know, talking to different people in different parts of the continent, is that what you were getting?
So there are a number of, I mean, there's no excuse really for violence, because all issues can be resolved amicably in love and in the spirit of being a protector as well.
Most definitely.
But you know, I think the problem lies when one gender believes I'm superior to the other, and I demand total respect. I demand to be in the driving seat. And often, I think it's also important to also note that even though the masculinity norm creates an expectation that men should provide, not all men are able to provide. So there's hierarchy of masculinity. When you're able to provide and protect, you are the ideal man that the society looks for to. In fact, the expectation is not that you provide only for your family as a man. You also provide for your community. You raise kids of other, you know, cousins, uncles, and nephews. You know, you have a role. And then when you excel so much in that role, you see they honor you with a title in the community because of your contribution to the community. So that's an ideal man in an African setting. But then that's a weight of expectation that might be a burden for men as well. And often men may not be able to live up to these provide and protect expectation in the community. And often men still want to assert their leadership role, even though they are unable to meet the masculinity expectation. And at times, it might also create conflicts within the family. Also, I mean, for a woman expect you to provide, if you're unable to provide, that might also be the basis of conflict. But again, it's important not to make excuse for men being violent. And it's also important that we need to also begin to understand that these roles are changing. These roles have never been static. In the traditional African society, where men deal with a lot in the bushes, you know, the animals, there are people trying to raid your community, men have expectation to fight and defend. But now, you know, we don't need to go into the bushes to fight a lion or to ward off people that want to attack your community like it used to be. So the roles are changing, and now both men and women are educated. They can get a job. If you have a boy child and a girl child, you send both of them to school. They can get good jobs, and you know, and they can all be able to provide now. And in that spirit of now educating, you'll realize that, and I think you can also tell us that for, I think, most of the countries in Africa, the journey of boy child now to being a man
that whole circumcision, it's really, really a big deal in different communities. It's a big deal for them. They really, really celebrate it. Talk to us about what you have, learned in your research about how boys are taught how to be men. Are they verbally taught this is what you need to do? You need to go out there, or do they just learn? Monkey see, monkey do type of situation. What happens? No,
in some communities, and this is really pronounced in South Africa because I've lived in South Africa. There's this rite of passage for men, and it's so celebrated. It's a big ceremony when a boy is transitioned to manhood. In fact, they go to the bushes where they are initiated and they are circumcised as well. In some communities that practice circumcision. And when they come back, it's a lot of fanfare, celebration. They buy the boy a mattress. Now you can take home a wife, So you're a man. And then, I was part of a study that tried to understand what's happening in the bushes as well. So they are taught about how to be a man. They are taught about their role, not only to their family, but also to their community. They are supposed to defend the community against any attack. I know there are no more attacks but then, many of those things they say to them, they still say to them up to today. And that marks the transition to adulthood. And I know it's not limited to South Africa, in many communities as well.
Even in Kenya, and mostly the Western region, it really is big. And even as you continue that train of thought, now what is being told here in this closed door kind of meetings with these boys? I mean, whoever is teaching them this, do they have the knowledge of these are the conversations we need to be having as a country, that we need to be ending femicide, that gender-based violence, there should not be an excuse of that? Do these trainers of these old men who are teaching these young boys, do they understand that? My answer would be we have not necessarily engaged them. Of course, we've tried to do that when we, like I said in South Africa, the circumcision they do in the bushes constitutes a health risk. People's, private part are being chopped off, and they have to go and reconstruct in the hospital. Sometimes they also use the same sharp object on many boys. They transmit HIV. So the extent to which we've engaged them is to improve the health outcomes and to reduce HIV transmission. But I think we need to engage them more to then bring the issue of gender-based violence on the table, so that those issues are also discussed during the initiation ceremony. But I think just to continue my thought. Men also learn to be men by observing their fathers. Yes.
In fact, much of just recalling my own experience, I learned to be men by, observing my brothers and my father. And also men in the community as well. So beginning from age 11, 12, 13, 14, men are already understanding, or they already have clarity on the expectation of who a man is and who a woman. In fact, that's when they form that gender
from what they're seeing.
Norms, based on what they're seeing. And the best way also is for men in the families to be a role model of the kind of men they want their boys to become, because that's how they learn to become a man. But also important, because these things are learned, it means that there is also opportunity to intervene. If young boys are learning to become a man by being violent, so what's other men? Because it's also important to note that men are more likely to be victims of violence from men as well. So as women are also victims of violence from men. Men as a way to assert masculinity. It's not that they don't want to tolerate disrespect from women. They also don't tolerate disrespect from men. And they fight on their honors. In fact, there are cultural rights that make men fight over the wife. I think in the northern parts of Nigeria, they have the ritual ceremony where we want this girl, both of us will compete, we beat ourselves to the point of death. And it's the winner that gets the girl. So all those sort of culture exists somewhere where men have to use violence to obtain whatever they want. So it's sort of ingrained in somewhat as an aspect of our culture. But because they learn to be violent, they can also unlearn that sort of behavior. And that's why it's important to inculcate in men, or to instill in men the ideals of positive masculinity, that you can always be a man without being violent. Yeah.
Right. And still on the whole spirit of monkey see, monkey do, before we take a short break, just briefly, you tell us about how, I mean, even for you and so many men out here, even as they're growing, they see what either their older brothers are doing or even fathers. But when you take a look at Kenya, the number of single mothers is quite high. So that means these are young boys who are growing up without a father figure, really. So what they do and what they would be doing is now looking for father figure from the internet, you know, going to social media and trying to see this would probably, I'd follow this. And maybe talk to us about that briefly before we take a short break.
I mean, social media is both a force for good and there are also bad aspects of social media. In fact, it's so concerning. I think here in Kenya, it's so concerning that there are people on the social media that, you know, prove to be the ideal, you know, they teach men about to be the ideal man. But some of these things they say, you know, are probably part of the problem. And for me, I think it's it's also a symptom of a backlash to the progress that we made over the years. Okay. And you know, we might say, you know, things are really bad in terms of violence against men and girls. However, we've also made substantial progress, and it's always important to talk about the progress we've made. In fact, it's because of some of this progress that we've made that you've seen people coming online to say, oh, boys are now being marginalized, okay, you have to be strong, you have to tame your women and all those things. And that's where the problem lies. Okay. And the onus is on social media to do some sort of content moderation. Right. Because I don't think they should give platform to people that's basically preaching for men to be violent. All right.
Anthony, put a pause on that conversation. We'll be right back to dive deep into social media, because this is at the heart of where most things really happen. Joined by Anthony Idowu, he's a research scientist from the African Population and Health Research Center. It is the 16th day of the 16 days of activism against GBV. And this morning, we are focusing on you as a man. You have a brother, father. What is his role on ending GBV? We'll be right back after this short break.
Vile unavyojua watoto wengi sana hawana namna. Mimi ningependelea watoto wasome.
I'm here to stress on education. At the same time, let us actually do any kind of sport that we are doing. Sport speaks the best language to everybody.
Tunataka tutafute talents. Zile raw talents kutoka kule nyumbani mashinani mahali tuko leo.
Hizi mbio za Chepsaita, like all other sports, zinaleta watu pamoja.
We want to use this event to uplift the lives of the community.
Nafurahia hii mchezo sana. Hata sikaange naambianga watu tuende Chepsaita.
Wanafunzi wakimbie ili wakuze talanta ya mbio ama kuhimiza tena elimu.
This is the place to be. Hapa ndipo mahali wanastahili kuwa tarehe 7. Wale watoto walikimbia last year, wamekimbia mpaka wamefuka mipaka zetu za Kenya.
Hey there friends, welcome to Kids on the Block, where fun and imagination come alive. We dive into magical world filled with exciting adventures and awesome friends.
What position were you in?
I was number 2.
What position were you?
Number 1.
He decided
to cross the bridge, buy his house, and look for food on the other side.
We're going to do half cup of chocolate chips, and the other one, we're going to do half cup.
With Anthony Idowu Ajoyi. He is a research scientist at the African Population and Health Research Center. And so far we have really dived on quite a lot. Before the break, we had touched just a bit on social media and how even for young men growing up are seeking the ways of men who, particular men who have taken upon themselves to say this is what a real man looks like. And I think I love the fact that even before, we're taking a look at the traditional aspect of how it is, how you, now for society, traditional society, there's one, role model who even other young men look at and say, I'd want to be like so-and-so because, he goes to the bush and he protects us. But then right now, with the advent of social media, you have so many young men who come to these people. And according to this young man, Anthony, they say, I love the fact that this person on social media tells me what I want to know, tell me what I want to hear. And people religiously follow through this. I don't know from your research, that whole advent and the impact it has, and particularly now talking about what we are discussing today, GBV.
So some of the approaches used in reaching men also sort of mirror what's happening on social media because, the programs that target men, make use of, religious leaders that are pretty influential in the societies to, share the message around gender equality, around ending violence against men and girls, because they are already models in the society. Also, there are sports coaches, for example, who mentor young men that they try to, vet and then identify the ones that could really work with. Because not because you're a coach or because you're a religious does not necessarily mean that you'll be the vessel for that message. Yeah. Because it's important that the message you're giving also sort of tallies with your character as well. Mm-hmm. So we call them champions. So we identify champions who can now be role models to young men, who can then bring the message around ending gender-based violence as well as gender equality. Now, because we have not reached a lot of men, and men crave, they task for these role models, who to show them the ideal way to be a man. You see figures emerging on social media who are not necessarily trained on these issues, who are not researchers, who just, get notoriety or popularity, by being able to say some extreme things on social media. And a lot of men, go to them. And that's dangerous, really, really dangerous, because of the misogyny or so many things, outlandish things. And I think that's sort of the way the social media works. The more controversial you are, the more extreme you can really go, the more people sort of flock to you. Yeah. And that's dangerous. And I know the reasons why men tend to, frequent handles like that or the shows they organize, because men want role models. Mm-hmm. They want people who can engage them. And what's that ideal way of becoming a man? Who is going to teach them? Because for one thing, they might not have men in their own life that they can model. Some men also do not see their father as the ideal men as well. So they're looking for answers. And then they tend to, go towards social media for this answer. But I think it's important for men watching also to note that these men that you listen to, who are they in their own personal life? Forget about the social media life, because there might be a contrast between the way they project themselves and the way they are in their real life. But it's important to be more curious, to want to understand who are these men in their own real life. Are they really the model you really want to become? With the way they've lived their own life? Because the answer might just simply lies there. You don't need to only pay attention to what they say, but also pay attention to their private life. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also important that governments should be interested in what's happening on social media, because it can really create a lot of problems that solution often. But also, what alternative exist as well? And that's why this show is really important, talking about this issue, because men want alternatives to these voices as well on social media. But in the absence of the alternative voices, and then you leave them with no choice than to listen to consume whatever is on social media. But social media may not necessarily be the ideal place to learn about how to be a man. I believe if you want to learn about how to be a man, look towards the successful men, models, examples of men in your communities, or in your country, on the continent. Who are the ideal men you really want to measure your life across? And that should be important for every man. Yeah.
And we hear this two words, toxic masculinity. As a researcher, talking to different people in the continent, in African continent, first of all, what do they understand by these two words? Secondly, is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? What do we do with toxic masculinity, even as a man who's growing up? Yes. Even as you also wind up on this, and what do we need to do as men in this conversation?
Now, the concept of toxic masculinity is to also draw a contrast between toxic masculinity and positive masculinity. When men use their roles in society for positive influence, to embrace gender equality, to shun violence, that's positive masculinity. But the contrast is when men abuse their role in society or their power in society to exploit other men, to exploit women, to abuse women. That's what we term as toxic masculinity. And also some would say that a man that's also not taking responsibility at home might also be exhibiting some form of toxic masculinity. But certainly violent men are a good example of toxic masculinity, or what we call negative masculinity. It just means this is a negative way of displaying your manliness. Masculinity is about expression of manliness, right? So the positive way to express manliness is to be a protector, right? To be non-violent, to be peaceful, to support your family, to nurture your kids and ensure they are well behaved in the community, to train your children, right? Those are positive things that men do. And most men generally do that, right? But there are some men that do not do that. So, and that's why we talk about toxic masculinity. I think it's also important to note that the whole concept of toxic masculinity is not to abuse all men. Because I think there's that misrepresentation on social media. When we use the term toxic masculinity, we are basically saying these are negative ways to express manliness, whether it's through violence, through showing no signs of vulnerability. It's okay to be vulnerable sometimes, to show emotions, because we are human.
And I had said that we're going to be starting with the family. So as we now, for your parting shot, just now nationally, for the leaders, this one, we are really focusing on them and what they're going to be telling us even today, focusing on human rights day particularly. What kind of policies should we be seeing? What is the trend that our leaders should be taking on this conversation?
I think our leaders themselves should be accountable. They should look into their life to say, am I an ideal man? Am I a good example to my community? And if you answer that question, how can they help other men and young boys in my community to be ideal, to exhibit these ideal virtues that I exhibit on a daily basis? That's one. But two, they have a role in terms of putting in place policies and laws that helps to end violence against women in the society. And a number of our countries on the continent have already subscribed to these human rights principles. So it's just about domesticating it in our respective countries to ensure that we aggressively prosecute violators, right? Anyone that is violent is a criminal offense, because most of our countries have passed law to say we are no longer going to tolerate violence. So we need to prosecute offenders to set an example for others. But more importantly, we also need to provide resources for survivors of gender-based violence. Because we need to do both. We need to support survivors, but we also need to prosecute aggressively. And I think if we do these two, I think it's also important that even in curriculums in schools, we need to include this, societal issue, because it's an important issue that should be taught to young boys as well in school. I think if we can do all of these, we will see change in the coming years. Yeah.
Most definitely. Thank you very much, Anthony Ido. Joy is a research scientist at African Population and Health Research Center. We have learnt a lot from you. We do expect quite a lot as of today. And speaking of expecting quite a lot, Kabete National Polytechnic is having the rehearsals today. You're asking why? Because they're going to be having the 5th graduation ceremony today. After this short break, I'll be telling you what you need to do to know about this graduation ceremony and more about this institution. Don't go too far.